Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Taanis Daf Chav Gimel is completely given over to Braisos describing the stories of Choni HaMa'agel. The first will be an expanded version of the story of Choni HaMa'agel and his tefillos for rain. The second will be the story of Choni HaMa'agel and how he slept for 70 years. And then we will have two stories of Choni HaMa'agel's grandchildren, one the son of his son and one the son of his daughter. So the Gemara begins with the first brisa. We're starting a few lines into the daf at the two dots. The Brisa says at one time most of Adar had already passed and there was no rainfall. So the people, the Talmidim, sent messages to Choni, who was later to be called Choni HaMa'agel, Choni the circle maker, and they said, please be mispal for us that rain should fall. He went and he prayed, he davened, but rain did not fall. So he drew a circle on the ground and he stood inside it. The same way that Chavakuk Hanavi did something similar. He was mispal, he made a hole in the ground and he stood in the hole. And they both said, I'm not leaving here until my prayers are answered. So Choni HaMa'agel said that his expanded tefillah was, Ribbon Shalom, your children have placed their face towards me because I am like a member of your household. I swear by your name, I'm not going to leave here until you have mercy upon your children. So it began to drizzle, drops began to fall, and the Talmidim came to him and they said, Rebbe, we are aware of what you did. We would like to be able to continue seeing you, and we would not like to die. But if it doesn't rain properly, we are going to die. It seems that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent these drops just in order to free you from this vow you made that you're not going to leave the circle. But that's not going to solve a problem. So Choni HaMa'agel then spoke with great, as it were, chutzpah towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he said, "That's not what I asked for. I did not ask for a bunch of drops. I asked for enough rain to fill all the reservoirs of water, the Boros, Sichin, and Ma'aros." So then the rain began to fall with a fury. It fell in an angry flood. And each drop was the size of the mouth of a barrel. And Chachamim said there was not a single drop that fell that was less than an entire lug. It's about 9 to 12 ounces in one single drop. So the Talmidim said, Rebbe, we want to see you. We don't want to die. This rain is going to destroy the world. It's the only reason why this is falling. So Choni HaMa'agel again spoke to Kadosh Baruch Hu with brazenness, and he said, that's not what I asked for either. I asked for rain which will be of ratzon, rain which will be desirous, and rain which will be bracha, and which will help the world. And then the rain began to fall in its proper way. It fell in an acceptable bracha way, and it fell so much that the people had to flee to Har HaBayis in order to escape the rising water. And they said to him, Rebbe, just like you were mispal that the rain should fall, now you need to be mispal, please, that the rain should stop. So Choni HaMa'agel said, my Kabbalah, my tradition is that you do not pray for too much goodness. You do not pray for the goodness to stop, for a bracha to stop, but let's see if we can do something about it. Anyway, bring me a cow for gratitude. So he brought a carbon, he brought a cow, he did smicha, and he was misvade on the cow. Now, what was the carbon? Rashi says it was a carbon shlamim, others explain it as a carbon toda. And he said, Ribbon Shalom, your people, Yisrael, which you took out of Mitzrayim, are not able to stand with too much good and not too much punishment. You were angry at them. You expressed anger against them, and they could not stand. They cannot withstand your wrath. Then you poured goodness upon them, and they cannot stand with your goodness either. The rain is too much. May it be your will. May it be the will before you, Kadosh Baruch Hu, that the rain should stop and there should be peace and pleasantness in the world. And then the ruach, the wind blew, and it scattered the clouds from the sky, the sun shone, and everybody else went out to the fields because the rain had fallen as they needed, and now the rain was over. And went out to the fields, they found that there was so much rain that had caused a large amount of mushrooms to grow, and they understood that this was food, and they understood that it was bracha, and therefore they were able to eat. Now, the story continues that Shimon ben Shetach, who was the Gadol Hadar at the time, sent a message to Choni, and he said, if not that you're a great person, Choni, I would put you in Chayrim, because what you did is disrespectful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, there's two versions of the Girsa here, whether the Tainan was that he made the challenge to Hashem with a circle, or that he asked again, and he said, no, that's not what he wanted, and that's not what he wanted, and he 3 times requested, I want it like this, I want it like that. But Shimon ben Shetach expressed to him, he said, in the days of Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu had taken the rights to the rain from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He had said that I swear that there's not going to be rain besides by my word, had you been there in a time where the control of rain was given over to people and you would have spoken the way you did, it would have been a Chel Hashem, possibly because Eliyahu said no rain and you said yes rain, but whatever is there, rain was given over to people, and still the way you express yourself would have been a Chel Hashem at that time. So here where the power of bringing rain was not given over to people, and yet you still expressed control over it like that, and you demanded not rain like this, not rain like that. It's a tremendous Chel Hashem, and I would have said that you were sitting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I would have put you in Cherem. But what could I do, says Shimon ben Shadach? You have apparently done wrong before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but he listens to you anyway, like a son who does wrong to his father, and his father fulfills the will of the son anyway. Like, for example, if the son says, Father, take me to a place, wash me in hot water, rinse me in cold water, give me nuts, give me almonds, give me peaches, give me pomegranates, all these things, he demands a long list of things, and the father gives it to him. The same thing applies to you. You had a list of things that you asked for, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave it to you anyway. So the pasuk that applies to you is Yismach avicha ve'imcha v'sagel yoldosecha. There should be joy to your father and your mother, and happiness to those who give birth to you. Says another brisa, the Sanhedrin and the Lishkas Hagazit sent a message to Choni HaMa'agel, and they explained a few psukim in accordance to what he had said, and he did. So the first, it's a series of psukim from Iyov. So the first is Vatigzar Omer Vayakom Lach V'al Drochecha Naga Or. So they said this means as follows: Vatigzar Omer Vayakom Lach, you decreed things with your speech, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu fulfilled it for you. On your way there is the glow of light. That means to say that a generation that had the darkness of tragedy because there was no rain, you brought light to them with your tefillos. Now the Gemara continues. The Sanhedrin continued with the next pasuk in Sefer Iyov. It said ki heshpilu v'atomar gavei, that you took the generation which was low, which was at a nadir, and you picked them up, you lifted them up with your tefillah. Sachenayim Yoshia, Sachenayim means those who are downcast eyes you saved. The Gemara interprets the word Einayim as Avonim, or Avonos, changing the Yud into a Vav, and it says the generation that had sins you were able to save through your tefillos anyway. Next, Inaki, Imolate, Naki means you saved the dar which was not clean. You had a generation which was not clean from Averos, and you were able to save them through your tefillos anyway from this terrible thing. From the pure actions of your hands and your pure tefillah, you are able to save them. Okay. Now the Gemara moves on to say the story of Choni HaMa'agel and how he slept for 70 years. Says the Gemara, Rav Yochanan says all the days of his life, Choni HaMa'agel was pained by the pasuk which he couldn't understand. The pasuk says Shir HaMalos, a song of the ascents, a song that goes up. B'shuv Hashem Meshiv Tzion Hayinik Chalmim, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu will return those who leave the Babylonian exile, and they return to Eretz Yisrael. Hayunik Chalmim will be like dreamers. That sounds like it means to say that the entire exile will be like one bad dream. We are awakening from the bad dream. So Choni said, I don't understand this. How could 70 years, the exile was 70 years long, how could 70 years be a dream? Nobody sleeps for 70 years. So it happened that he was walking along the way, and he saw a person planting a charuv tree, a carob tree, a boxer tree. Now he knew that you plant a tree like that, it doesn't grow fruits for a very long time. So he said to the planter, how long are you going to wait for this tree to give it fruits? When will it finally bear fruit? So the man was obviously an expert in agriculture, and he said it's not going to bear fruit for another 70 years. So Choni said, so what are you planting it for? You're sure you're going to be alive 70 years from now and you'll be able to pick its fruits? So the man said, I'm not planting it for me. When I came to the world, I found the world full of carob trees. They were obviously planted by my ancestors for my benefit to be able to eat from them. Well, I'm planting a carob tree now so that my children should have the benefit of that tree. Choni then went and he sat down to eat some bread. And as we know, when you eat, it makes you sleepy. And he fell asleep. Now, a outcropping of rock, an entire wall of rock formed around him. He was hidden within the rock. And he slept for 70 years, and no one ever found him because he was hidden within this rock. 70 years later, he awoke, he came out of the rock, and he saw somebody picking carobs from that tree. So he said, are you the person who planted the tree. So he said, no, I'm his grandson. I'm the grandson of the one who planted the tree. So Choni understood that 70 years had passed. He must have slept for 70 years because the tree wasn't going to bear fruit until 70 years later. He also saw that the donkey that he used to ride was not around anymore, but the donkey had already given birth to generations and generations of other donkeys. So 70 years had passed, so he went to his house, and he said, is the son of Choni HaMa'agel here? So they told him, no, the son of Choni HaMa'agel has already long died. His grandson is alive. So he said, I'm Choni HaMa'agel. Of course, they didn't believe him, and they sent him away, so he didn't have a family anymore. So he went to the Beis Medrash, where he was well respected, and he saw that the Chachamim were learning, and they understood something, and the expression that they used of joy at having understood it was, oh, now we have it as clear as if Choni HaMa'agel was here. In the days of Choni HaMa'agel, if we ever weren't clear about something, the Chachamim at that time were always able to ask him, and he explained it to them clearly. So this we understand as if Choni HaMa'agel was around. So he said, wow, okay, they're talking about Choni HaMa'agel. So he walked in and he said, I'm Choni HaMa'agel. I'm the one. Of course, they didn't believe him, and they did not give him the respect that would have been due Choni HaMa'agel. And therefore, he no longer had a role to fulfill in the world. He didn't have a family that he could live with and help and support. He didn't have Talmidim that would be willing to learn from him. So he said, a man does not belong in the wrong generation, and he asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take his life, and so happened, and that's how he died. Says Rava, this is the meaning of the expression, O chavrusa, O misusa, you either need a social circle, or you're going to die. A person cannot live in a useless existence. Now the Gemara discusses the grandchildren of Choni HaMa'agel. So there was one by the name of Abba Chilkiah. He was the son of Choni HaMa'agel. The Gemara is going to describe that he used to be the one that the Chachamim would always turn for to be mispal for rain in his day. The Gemara describes one particular incident in which he did a lot of strange actions and how he explained them one by one. So the Gemara says, whenever there was a lack of rain, they would send Chachamim to Chilkiah, to Abba Chilkiah, and they would ask him to daven for rain. There came one time when they sent two Chachamim to go meet him, to go ask him to be mispal for rain, and they came to his house. He wasn't there, so they went to look for him in the fields, and there they found him in the fields, and he was busy hoeing. He was working, he was hoeing the ground. Now, Abba Chilkiah was very poor. He had very little to his name, and this was work that he did in order to support himself at that time. So they went to him, and they greeted him, and he did not greet them in return. He said a word of greeting, but he didn't greet them in a favorable, welcoming way. He didn't spend time with them. Then they watched and they waited, and they saw that as he left, he took a bundle of wood over one shoulder, he put his hoe over the same shoulder, and over the other shoulder he put his cloak, put his talis, his glima. Now, he thought this was a bit strange. It would be more logical to put the wood and the hoe on top of the cloak so that you save yourself from being injured or scratched by those items. Well, he went further, and he walked along the way, and the entire way he didn't wear shoes. When he got to the water, he put his shoes on and walked through the water. That's strange. Usually people take their shoes off to go through the water. The opposite. When he walked through thorns, he lifted up his cloak and exposed his legs and walked through the thorns with bare legs. It's also the opposite of what most people do. They usually put their cloaks on and cover their legs so they don't get scratched. Then when he came home, he approached the house. His wife came out, and she was all dressed up fancy with jewelry. And then they walked towards the house together. The woman went in first. He went in afterwards. That's also strange. Usually a man doesn't walk behind his wife. It's not considered tznius. And they did not invite the Chachamim to come in until after both of them had already entered the house. Then they brought them into the house. He sat down to eat, and he did not invite the Chachamim to eat any of the bread that he had. He did not offer any to them. When he gave it out to his children, he gave one to the older and two to the younger. Also the opposite. Usually the older gets the double portion, not the younger. Then he said quietly, he whispered out of earshot of the Chachamim, he said to his wife, look, I know that these Chachamim are here to ask us to daven for rain. If we do that, then it's going to look like we're Bali Gaiva. We'll create a reputation for ourselves. Let's instead go up to the roof now, and we'll daven there, and the rain will come, and then they won't know that we daven for it, and we won't be machzik tov alatzmenu. We won't look like we're taking credit. So they went up to the roof. They stood in opposite corners, diagonally across from each other, and they began to be mispal for the rain. And the rain clouds did arrive, but they came first from the side of Mrs. Abba Chilkiah, from Abba Chilkiah's wife. They came to her first, which was the sign that her prayers were answered first. Okay, then they came down, and they returned to where the Talmidei Chachamim were, and he said to them, why have the Rabbanan arrived? What are you here for? So they answered, the Chachamim sent us to you, to the master, in order to ask that you should be mispal for us, that the community should have rain. So he said, Baruch Hashem, you don't need to ask me anymore. Baruch HaMakom, blessed is Hashem that did not make you come on to the needs of Abba Chilkiah. You see, the rain came already, so you don't have to ask me for anything. Baruch Hashem, you didn't need me. So they said, we're not fooled. We know that you went and you were mispal. We know that it's because of you. But please tell us the explanation of many of the strange things that we saw you did from the time we arrived until now. So first of all, when we came, how come you didn't greet us? No, the Chazal say you're supposed to greet b'sever panim yafos, but you didn't. So he answered, I was working and I was hired to work per hour or per the day, and I did not have time to interrupt my work because I was paid per the time. I could not use some of the time that I was paid to work in order to spend time with you. Okay, they said, why did you put the wood on one shoulder and the hoe on the same shoulder, and only on the other shoulder did you put your talus? So he said it was a borrowed talus. I borrowed it for the purpose of wearing, not for the purpose of using to put weights on it. It would be damaged by it, and therefore I didn't have a right to do that. So he said, well, why didn't you wear shoes when you walked on the ground, but you wore shoes in the water? He said, well, he couldn't afford to replace his shoes very often, and therefore he didn't want to wear them if he didn't need to. So when he walked on the ground, he could see where he was going, making sure he didn't step on anything dangerous like snakes or scorpions or whatever. He was careful where he stepped, and therefore he didn't wear the shoes because he didn't want to wear them out. In the water, however, he couldn't see what he was stepping on, and therefore he needed to wear the shoes to protect his feet. And he said, okay, why did you lift up your robes and cloaks when you went to the thorns? So he said, the robes will not get healed if they rip. They will not heal themselves. My legs, if they get scratched, they'll heal themselves. That's less of a waste if I allow them to become scratched and damaged. Okay, why did your wife come out towards you all dressed up? So he said, that's our custom in order that I shouldn't be attracted to anyone else, only to her. Therefore, she comes and she greets me, mekushetes, all bejeweled. And why did she go in first and you went in after? So he said, simple, I didn't know who you were. You looked like Chachamim, but of course I hadn't tested your character. I didn't know who you were. I did not want to leave you alone with her. So I couldn't go in first and leave her behind with you, and I couldn't have her go in and then you, or you go in and then her, and then you would be left alone with her inside the house. Therefore, she went in first and I went in afterwards, and only afterwards did we invite you in. Why, when you ate bread, did you not invite us? So he says, because it was obvious that I didn't have enough bread for you, and I wouldn't have been able to give you any. Had I invited you, it would have been Genevas Das. I would have tried to imply that I'm offering you something which I obviously don't have to give. You would have refused, but that would have been a false offer. And why should you give the younger child more than the older child? Because the older child is home all day. He is already out of yeshiva. He works from home, and therefore he could eat the entire day. The younger child in school doesn't have anything to eat, and therefore he needs to receive more food than the older one. Okay, now, last question. How come your wife was answered before you? She said the reason for that is one of two things. Either because since she's at home all day, whenever a poor person knocks on the door, she gives him bread, she gives him food. So she gives it to him more often, she gives it to him right away, and she gives him something that he could use immediately. When I meet a poor individual, I only give him money, and that is not something he can use right away. He has to go and buy food with that, and therefore it's not really such a benefit to him as what she does, and therefore her schus is greater. The other reason that she was answered before me is because it was once a situation in which there were tough people in the neighborhood, and they were problematic, and therefore we needed to get rid of them. I was mispala they should die, but she was mispala that they should do tshuva, which is a much more if you saw thing to do, and in truth they did do tshuva, and that's why she was answered before me. Now the Gemara speaks about someone by the name of Hanan Hanechba, Hanan the Hidden. Hanan the Hidden was also a grandson of Choni HaMa'agel. He was the son of the daughter of Choni HaMa'agel. So the Gemara says that when people needed rain, of course, they went to the grandson of Choni HaMa'agel, and they said, you also, can you please be mispal for us? But they didn't go themselves. What they used to do was they would send children who appeared to be orphans. They would send younger children in order to inspire his kavanah, and that he should have mercy upon them. And they came to him and they pulled on his cloak, and they said, Father, Father, Abba, Abba, please give us rain. And then he used to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Master of the world, look at these children who are so poor and so nebach that they can't even tell the difference between a father who could give rain and a father who can't give rain. Please act on their behalf and give them rain. The Gemara now says, why was he called Hanan Hanechba? Why is he called Hanan the hidden? The Gemara says, because he was hidden. There's a question what the Ger says. Was it that he acted with tznius in the restroom and he was careful not to expose anything unnecessarily? Or was it because he was hidden in his prayers? He made sure that no one saw him so that he should also not take credit for his tefillahs bringing the rain. Now on that topic, the Gemara says that Rabbi Zrika said to Rav Safra, look at the difference between the tzaddikim in Eretz Yisrael, which the Gemara calls takifi, the strong ones of Eretz Yisrael, and the tzaddikim in Bavel, which the Gemara calls the Chasidim, the pious ones of Eretz Yisrael. The Chasidim, that is the pious ones from Bavel. Now, who are the pious ones from Bavel? The Gemara says that refers to Rav Huna and Rav Chizda. Whenever the world needed rain, they would go together and they would say to each other, come, let's go be mispal together, so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should answer our tefillos together. Rashi has two versions as to why this showed weakness, either because they couldn't be answered individually, they can only be answered together if they were mispal together, and also because they didn't hide it. They did not act with tznius, that people shouldn't give them credit. They didn't mind if they were credited with having brought the rain through their prayers. Now, the strong ones of Eretz Yisrael, though, the Takifi, the Aradi Yisrael, that refers to Rav Yaina, the father of Mani. When the world needed rain, he would go into his house, and he would say the following thing. He would take an empty sack and say, okay, I'm going to the marketplace, I'm going to buy wheat for a zuz, exorbitant price, because there wasn't too much wheat to be had, but that's what I'm going to do. And he would go out, and he wouldn't go to the market, he would go stand in a hidden valley, under a rock, like it says, Mimamakim Karasich Hashem, I called out to Hashem from the depths, and he would be hidden from everyone, and he would be mispal then. When the rain would come, he would come home. And when he came home, they said, okay, where's all the grain that you bought for Azuz? He said, well, now that I said it was raining, and decided not to buy anything because the price is going to come down soon because there's now more rain, and therefore more things will grow. Now, the Gemara speaks about Rav Mani, who was the son of Rav Yonah Avud Rav Mani. And so the Gemara relates that Rav Mani, who was his son, they were people from the house of the Nasi who were causing him pain. They were being mitzayer him. So he went and he was mispalel by the grave of his father Rav Yonah, and he said, Abba, Father, these people are causing me pain. So there was a time when those people were causing him the pain, rode the horses over the grave of Rabbi Yonah, and the horses' feet got stuck in the dirt, in the soil there. And they were not able to move, and they were frozen there, held prisoner, until they were promised that they would never cause pain to his son, to Rabbi Mani, ever again. And there was another incident with Rav Mani. He always used to go to Rav Yitzchak bar Elyashiv. Rav Yitzchak bar Elyashiv was his Rebbe. And there were a couple of rich people who were members of the household of his father-in-law, and those rich people were causing him pain. They were giving him a hard time. So he went and he reported this to Rav Yitzchak bar Elyashiv, and Rav Yitzchak bar Elyashiv said, okay, it's because they're rich, so let them become poor. So then they quickly became poor, but then they would turn to Rav Mani and ask him to support them. So he went back to Rav Yitzchak bar Elyashiv and said, these people are causing me pain by constantly asking me to support them. So he said, okay, let them become rich. And indeed they became rich. And the Gemara doesn't say, but you would assume the problem was solved at that point. A similar incident that happened was that there was someone who complained to Rav Yitzchak bar Elyashiv that his wife was unattractive to him. And he said, what's her name? So he reported the name was Chana. So he said, well, may Chana become beautiful. She went ahead and she became beautiful. But then in her new beauty, she was haughty to him and she was difficult to get along with. So he went back to Rav Yitzchak bar Elyashiv and she said, now my wife's giving me a hard time. So he said, let Chana go back to her ugliness. And she went back to the way she was before. Now the Gemara reports that there were two Talmidim also of Rav Yitzchak bar Elyashiv, same person who gave these brachos. And they asked, let the master, let Rabbi Yitzchak please be mispal on us so we should become smart. You see that whatever bracha he was mispal for someone was fulfilled quickly. So he said, I used to have the power to just order things around like that, but I no longer have that ability.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.